This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth. We're here in Paso Robles, California, and I am joined by the one and only Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media. And I just had a very interesting article come to my attention that I wanted to get Josh's views on, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. And that's this, just out from Zero Hedge. Canada urges world have fewer children to fight climate change. And they have this graph here. It says 11 things you can do to mitigate climate change. Number 1, have fewer children. And then they got, live car free, avoid air travel, buy green energy, all that kind of stuff. Way down at the bottom is upgrade the light bulbs. We all know how effective that is. But number 1 is to reduce the number of kids you're going to have in your family. Now, Josh, when people get into the area of talking about population control, what this really is about is a little thing called eugenics. And there might be a lot of people out there who are not familiar with what eugenics is in a nutshell. Maybe they've never heard that word before. So I think for this particular article, maybe you could start us off by explaining a little bit about what is genetics. Where does it come from?
Eugenics?
Yes, eugenics. Sorry.
Yeah, genetics.
Oh, yeah, sorry, eugenics.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is a huge problem that we are seeing an incremental frog boil to complete collective enslavement of the populace. And it sounds crazy. It's by basically creating a dependency among the masses. So we have the United Nations, which has been talking about using these kinds of agendas like, weather. The weather is super unpredictable. So it's easy to scare people with the weather and say, well, we are seeing these crazy storms, which you haven't seen in your lifetime because, these patterns go over centuries. And for that reason, we need the government to come in, the biggest polluter in the world, to restrict our ability to, drive vehicles, to have children like we've seen in China in the past, to be able to it's a restriction of free will. And it's a push towards complete dependency on government, the biggest polluter, which is where the irony comes in because, the government's like, well, look at all this pollution that people are creating. Well, let's actually look at the science here. And I've talked with climatologists about this as well. 97% consensus is a complete lie. And you have these climatologists that are coming forward and getting in trouble and getting blacklisted because they're not allowed to be skeptical, which is what science is all about, talking about how humans cause such a minuscule amount of, the carbon footprint in the air, which also creates such a minuscule amount of change in temperatures that it makes no sense. You can get rid of every human on the planet and still have one person left, and that person would be measuring the weather and realize that there's such a small difference that it wouldn't even be noted on, in a scientific study. So this is a huge lie, and the government, which is bombing countries all over the world, dropping chemical bombs, creating all these pollution hazards, these huge problems, are telling people that it's them, that they are the ones that are polluting, and therefore they shouldn't have children. And it comes from another perspective as well. It's a destruction of culture. It's them basically trying to eradicate certain cultures while growing other cultures. And you get into tricky territory there where it's very unpopular to talk about. But the fact of the matter is we can see that happening to Western civilization. And I'm not here to say government should stop it. I'm saying government shouldn't be creating it. I'm saying government shouldn't be involved. I'm saying individuals should be able to have their own free will, to have children, raise families. One of the most basic forms of humanity itself is our ability to spread and grow our families.
Well, could there be another agenda at play here as to why they wouldn't want us to go out and multiply? Is there some other kind of agenda here as to why they would not want people to do that? And what's the logic behind removing one child from a family? Is it literally just the carbon footprint imprint when we know it's not even a big deal anyways?
No, it's like I said, it's kind of an incremental frog boil. I think that a big part of it is power in numbers. You have a lot of people, and now I have always said you don't underestimate the power of stupid people in big numbers. There's definitely that problem. You got the voting system, you got democracy, you got people voting for a different puppet, and voting for change when it's government stealing our money and putting it into terrible things like blowing up kids and or paying off the interest on the debt and stuff like that. But at the same time, government has to realize that at some point, people will wake up to the fact that they are being used as dependent little slaves for the state to basically live on a plantation and provide for the state, and eventually become debt slaves and become slaves to everything that the government forces on us. And they will wake up, and we'll see what's happening in France. We'll see what's happening in Venezuela. We'll see what's happening in a lot of places around the world, even back in the Soviet Union, where people stand up and say, I've had enough. I've had enough of government government restricting my free will, destroying every single individual liberty I have under the guise of helping and change we can believe in, and yes we can, and all that kind of stuff. And they know that the population is growing and government is a tiny little amount of the population versus the vast majority of people. So the less people, the better it is for government. The less people, the better it is for government to be able to get away with their agendas and enslave the populace. They don't want, billions of people on their doorstep. That's not good for them.
And essentially, there are really only two ways to deal with the global population, is to increase the death rate or to decrease the birth rate. That's really the only way to do it. And I think a lot of this stems from this idea in the first place that we're overpopulated, which I myself believe is a complete myth. What are your thoughts on the idea that there's not enough resources and land and space for billions upon billions of more people here?
Well, first of all, there's not enough space to drop bombs on countries and kill millions of children, men, women, and children. And yet the government says that there's not enough space for us to live freely and, live off the land. As the population grows, the amount of food production grows, the amount of farmers grow, the amount of jobs grow. As, the population grows, the more productivity there is. And we've seen that throughout history. So statistically, it's actually better to have a bigger population. We're not even close to our precipice yet, not even remotely close. It's absurd. You drive across Canada, you drive across Russia, you drive across even the United States, and it's just all vast land where there's nobody for in most of the case. I think that it's largely about, like we saw in China, government saying we own the child, we own the family, we own you. We own this plot of land, and within that land we can decide who can leave, who can come in, and therefore we own everything that's in the land, including all the people that are living on the land, and they are property of us, the state, and they must conform to what the state says is all right. And then you have these two cheerleading teams cheering on the conservatives, cheering on the liberals, cheering on whatever flavor of collectivism they have, and all not realizing that as they do that, the government grows regardless, constantly grows, and the control complex gets larger, and you have these Pepsi and Coke fight back and forth while the people end up losing more and more of their freedoms. And now it's not just property taxes and government owning your property and saying that you don't own your own, public your own private property. Now it's government saying we own your child, we must educate your child, we will take away your child if they don't go into public school and be indoctrinated. And it's a horrible enslavement, complex.
Unbelievable propaganda is what we're dealing with here, and I think that's why we need to talk about these things when we see them and let people know that this is brainwashing propaganda. Folks, go forth and multiply. There's plenty of reasons for why we need more people on this planet. So, Josh, I know you're trying to hit that 100,000 subscriber number. Let us know the channel. Tell everybody.
Alternative Media, World Alternative Media. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. Mostly YouTube. We need that subscription rate up above 100,000 by January 1st. We're trying our best.
Yeah, and he's on track. So, guys, check the links in the description to where you can follow Josh. And, thanks for breaking it down for us today.
Thank you, and I hope that people multiply enough to subscribe. It's great.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.